It's not just white people, and it's not just at the individual level. And that's why it's so important to address the system as a whole, because it's the way that the system is working that's helping perpetuate this, not just the individual white people. Right. So it's important that you guys do your job, as an individual, as a person, but it's even more important that we are pushing the government to do its job.
Life is all about relationships. Lovers, family, body, or money. How satisfied you are can be completely explained by how you relate to things around you. This is Sophie Jaffe, and together with my husband, Dr. Adi Jaffe, we are here to explore and teach you how to maximize your relationships and achieve a happier life. Let's get ignited.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Ignited Relationships Podcast. I'm Adi Jaffe.
And I'm Sophie Jaffe.
And we are so excited to be coming back to you here this week in this crazy time. I was just saying to Sophie, we were on a walk before we recorded this, and I was saying it's such a you guys have all seen Groundhog Day, right? If you haven't, well, don't pause this podcast. But right after this podcast is over, make that the thing for this evening.
It's a little triggering. Maybe don't watch it.
No, watch it. It'll remind you
Trigger
exactly
warning.
What you're going through right now, even though it has nothing to do with Corona or a plague or an epidemic. But I was saying, I feel like I'm caught in this loop. I was really excited. It's a Tuesday when we're recording this, and I was really excited about the day. I'd had a day off yesterday with Sophie, but life is such groundhog, and you're so trapped. I don't get to leave this house, and it's always the same thing. And I'm waking up and I'm doing everything. It's just day after day. That by the end of the day, I'm just taxed. I'm just done. I can't think. I can't.
It's just too much.
Understand. My brain is like, why are we doing this again, mommy?
Yeah, I feel that. It's just a never-ending loop.
Never-ending story. I'm losing my mind, people. Okay, so before I lose my mind, we're gonna get you to our interview here in a minute, but we gotta do our thing. So I'm gonna read a review, but there's something I need before the review. Oh, there it is. Drum roll. Thank you so much, Sophie. This one comes for you from Lindsay Vining. Escape into radical transparency. Bam. I love this podcast with my whole heart and soul. Listening to Ignited has made my life a more honest and transformative place. The concept of radical transparency has really challenged my mind and my life. Sophie and Adi deliver a transformative amount of honesty that makes me take a deep look at my behavior in all relationships in my life. I've learned about boundaries, honesty, intense love, and sexuality. To say that this podcast is my savior isn't enough. This podcast has changed the way I view life and the way I want to impact the world and the people around me. Please listen to Ignited to further your understanding of yourself and your relationships. Much love to you both.
Such a special review. Thank you so much for that. Please reach out to us so we can send you a special care package, which if we read your review that you leave on air, we will send you a special care package, and it includes philosophy goodies, superfoods, and then some Ignited fun stuff.
Love it. Thank you so much, Lindy. Again, we say this all the time. This is the reason why we do it. We're here to have the conversations that are difficult, are transparent. We're going to be transparent with you about our own lives and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's what makes these things special. And I want to remind you that when this Black Lives Matter, racial inequality shift, I don't know, what do you call it? Earthquake in our existence came up about a month ago now. One of the things I was really cognizant of is not letting the fire burn out too quickly on the work we do, because I knew things would kind of just go back to normal. And if you look at your Instagram feed, you look at Facebook, etc., they've settled. And our promise was for you to keep being exposed to these stories and to keep this front of mind. And we have Reyna with us today here, and it's such a different look than the other ones that we've done, and I love that we're bringing completely different stories. Mixed Philippine and Black, first generation college student, and she talks a lot about dating interracially and this whole idea of being the other and all this stuff that comes up. So many times we talk about the extreme versions of what these things look like, but the reality is almost as anything else in life. The extremes are obvious, and we pay attention to them, and they take that attention and they require it. But so much of the work that we're talking about doing here is subtle, and you're going to hear a lot of that today.
And the quote for today comes in connection to that. The quote is from actually someone that I've loved during this quarantine. She makes these really cool, beautiful graphics of quotes. And this one is, so it's called Quotes by Christy is the account. And then the quote is from Christine Mason Miller. And it says, "At any given moment, you have the power to say, this is not how the story is going to end."
I love that.
At any given moment, you have the power to say, this is not how the story is going to end. I love that so much for so many different issues in life, but really just taking control of our own stories, our own storybooks of life, our own lives, our own journey, and saying like, no, I have the power to help this, to navigate this ship into a different direction.
Yeah, I love it. It's just so apropos to everything that we talk about on this podcast, right? You always have a moment to reset. You always have a moment to make the choice to show up differently. You always have a moment to say, hey, I've just learned from this experience and I'm going to move forward in a different way than I ever thought was possible before.
Hey, you have the choice to be humble. You have the choice to say you're sorry. You have the choice to forgive. And like, there is so much power in that. Like, look at like the forgiveness prayer or the Hawaiian, like just the energetic agreement from your side to say, I'm going to give up on that anger, or I'm going to forgive that person. They might not even know that you forgave them. The power in just within yourself doing the work and showing up and just saying like, I'm going to put my hands up, or whatever the choice is to make it different, to say you're sorry, to forgive, to lean into your marriage, to leave the marriage, to into friendship, to have boundaries. All of these decisions we make can completely affect the trajectory of your life.
100%.
And other people that love you and other people in your life. So just know that you always have the power to make a choice. And we're here to offer you unique choices in life and different paths that may not be the way that other people live their lives, but we're here to expose all of it and be vulnerable and transparent so that you can make better decisions in your life from a place of truth, not based off what people think or feel.
Absolutely. So check out this week's incredible interview.
Let us know what you think.
See you on the other side.
Bye.
Hey everybody, D here, and I wanted to tell you about these new Blue Blocks glasses that I've been wearing. If you're on any of our chats, you might have actually literally seen me wear them, because the ones I wear have these yellow lenses. And I gotta tell you, I've tried other Blue Blocker glasses before, and they felt okay, right? I felt a little bit of a shift in the way that the screens that I'm staring at every single day affected me. But then I heard about Blue Blocks, and these guys really went to task. We just interviewed their founder. He's an amazing, amazing guy who really wanted to understand, how does light affect vision? And you know, I'm like the science guy here. So I wanted to tell you that there's nothing I put on. So they have Blue Blocks has 3 different levels of their lenses. Blue light, which are kind of like the ones you see a lot of people wear around. They're clear and help with the blue light coming in from screens. My favorites are the summer glow lenses. They're yellow lenses, and I swear I put these things on during the day and I can actually feel my anxiety go down. And that's what they're meant for. It's like the combination of color therapy and blue light blocking at the same time. And then on top of those, they created the Sleep Plus lens that is almost like a reddish orange. It blocks out almost all of the blue light that's coming your way, and so it's really, really great right before sleep. But here's the thing. These are amazing glasses that have actually been tested to block out the right frequencies of blue light. So if you're like me, especially during this time when we're staring at screens and Zoom and meetings and everything is happening online, you want to get these glasses, because I feel it. Literally, my sleep is better. My anxiety throughout the day is better when I put these things on. They're amazing. And we got you guys a special code. If you use the code IGNITED, just capital IGNTD, you'll get not only free shipping, but also 15% off. And these things are coming all the way from Australia, so you know you want to save on that shipping. All right, guys, check these out. They're amazing. This is the only company that actually backs their blue light blocking by scientific evidence that the right frequencies are being blocked. It's going to help change your life. the stories we're talking about, even for that 5-minute little segment, I think I saw some of that already in one of those emails you guys were shooting back, like dating, school, teachers, I don't know, of yoga classes. Like, it doesn't matter what the context is. I think what we realize in some of the conversations, and maybe I sound dumb by just saying I realize it in these conversations, it should have been obvious to me, but was that part of this whole equation is just the fact that for anybody who's in any of the communities we're talking about, just like people of color community in general,
right?
When interactions go sideways, you have to think to yourself, okay, wait, was this because of who I am or something I did? Or is it because I'm too dark or I look different?
Yeah. And for me, part of that, the sad part is that if the world were really functioning the way that people wanted it to, that shouldn't even be a question in my mind. So you should be able to be rude to somebody without them thinking that you're being racist. And that's kind of what that's how I think about it. Like, if there was no racism, we could all be assholes and it would kind of be fine, you know? But now
I'm gonna start talking shit through the rest of this now.
Well, like I've been yelled at before by like an old grumpy white man and come home crying because I feel inside that it's because I'm black, and maybe a white person with me or that I've told has been like, well, maybe it's just because XYZ, or they're just a cranky old man. But it doesn't matter what that man's intent was. What matters is that I live in a world where that interaction can be perceived as racist.
Where you have to wonder.
Yes.
You have to wonder. I mean, I haven't been in a lot of those situations, right? Because even though I'm foreign, I look like a white dude, and so it doesn't matter until, like, I was in Belgium. I think I told you about this, but one time I was in Belgium hanging out with friends, and this guy heard me speaking Hebrew, and anti-Semitism is really big there. He wouldn't shake my hand. And I knew, but the reason I knew that was because I was Jewish and I spoke Hebrew, is because that shit doesn't happen to me.
Yeah.
That's the only way that I knew, is I went to shake the guy's hand. He shook his head no and said, no. I was like, oh, fuck. That's crazy. And it was like this moment to recognize. And I think that's the pain point, is it's so complex and it's so convoluted that
that was overt.
Well, that's even better for you because you got confirmation.
Exactly.
Because a lot of times you don't get that confirmation, and people use coded words and they try to skirt around the issue. And some of that can come from maybe they don't want to admit they're racist, or maybe they don't know that what they've done is because they have an implicit bias against black people or whoever.
I feel like that's the hardest thing in this, to be honest. Like, we've had so many white privilege conversations in this house, and over the last like 3 weeks or something. And the thing that's scariest is the shit you don't know is there.
Right.
That's the scariest stuff.
Well, and that's why the stuff with the police and like the law is really hurtful to the black community, because unless there are protections in place legally to prevent your own implicit bias from harming people, then you're just letting the cops go out and kind of make judgments on their own. So you can be a good cop, but you can have an implicit bias. And what if that is in a split second, you get to decide if you think this person is carrying a weapon. And then in that 1 second, you get to have a reaction. We don't have anything in place anywhere along those lines. We just give all power to the police officers to protect the community from our own implicit bias.
Yeah.
So it's easy to say, if you know someone who is racist, like, okay, maybe that person needs more help. But what about just like when we are walking down the street and we see someone, a black man on the same side, and we cross the street? Okay, I always say, like, I'm a woman. I do that like if any man.
I was going to say, I do that with any man.
Not just a black man. But it's important to take a second and think about that when you can. But we have a lot of implicit biases that we're not aware of, that we will make a snap decision about anything. You know, it doesn't have to be about race. So it's important that our laws and our government is protecting the community against that when we have people in power.
Yeah, there was a test. I'm going to find the name before this ends, or at least put it in the show notes. But there was a test on a big website, something I know I've read throughout the years, and it's a white privilege test, and then it gives you a percentage at the end. I was thinking as I was taking it, because I was answering yes to all of it, of course, but I was on like number 10 of 100. It was such a long test, and I was thinking it was trying to make a point like that, like you have white privilege, but it wasn't. It's really like thorough, just so you can really understand where on the spectrum you lay. I wish that was required. I wish that everyone had to take that.
Yeah.
I'm going to find it and I'm going to post it like crazy because it's just such an eye-opening. I know I have white privilege and I still don't even realize, like, through the questions I learned, like that example you gave, like we don't even know what we don't know. We have so many blind spots, and these ways, I mean, if I am implicitly being racist, I know that these white cops are being racist because I grew up in DC and like complete, like more black kids than there were white. Like, and if I still have white privilege, I know that some of these other men do.
Yeah. Well, and another thing to point out too is that, everyone's been talking about systemic racism. And part of that too is that we actually all have the same implicit bias against black people. Black people have it too. There was a study done in the 90s.
With the dolls, with the black and white dolls.
Oh, no, it was about, in the 90s, they asked a bunch of people to describe who the average drug user was, and 95% of people described a black person, even the black people. And the reason why we have to address this as a system as a whole is because we are pushing this imagery down to everybody. We're not only pushing it down to white people, about how black people are kind of at the bottom of society. We are the drug users. We are the gangbangers. We are the people in jail. We're the criminals, to the point where now when you say crime, it's synonymous with black person. And so it's not just white people, and it's not just at the individual level. And that's why it's so important to address the system as a whole, because it's the way that the system is working that's helping perpetuate this, not just the individual white people. So it's important that you guys do your job, as an individual, as a person, but it's even more important that we are pushing the government to do its job.
Yeah. Well, the study I was thinking about was in the 1940s. There was a study, it was Dr. Clark's, and it was the doll test. And they gave these white or black dolls to girls, black and white girls, and both groups preferred the white dolls because there was some idea that the white dolls are better.
Well, in the 1940s especially. But
but just the understanding of how strongly implicit bias can go is that it can live in the people who are being biased against, and they, in this case, these little black girls, see themselves as less good as represented in the doll. Kind of speaks to the pain, the generational pain that we're talking about here, right? Is if there's a systemic bias and you get used to it, you start implicitly living based on that bias. I
mean, how can you grow up as a kid thinking that you are not worth as much as your white counterparts? How do you rise above? How do you go to school? How do you believe that you can be a doctor? How do you think you can get out of the projects? How can you think you can get out of the bad neighborhoods? How can you believe in yourself when nobody else believes in you, and then you don't believe in yourself anymore? So we are saying that America provides opportunity, but tell me where the opportunity is, because I quite frankly don't see it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's...
Oh, as my white friend from high school, a really small town in Maryland, said yesterday, I mean, there's Barack Obama and
Obama. Who did he use?
Two basketball.
LeBron.
Michael Jordan and LeBron.
The athletes.
That's what you're using as proof that black people have opportunities?
It was literally like...
Because they worked their asses off to defy the odds?
And even to go one level deeper, it's an accepted fact now that athletics or music are like a black person's way out of the ghetto.
Yeah, right. And Barack.
And it's seen, well, I mean, Barack changed the equation. Right. He literally changed the equation, but it's one.
Right.
It's like one instance. So at least it's a possibility of more. But I mean, there's a lot of Congress women and men who are black. So it's not, that was like the apex, a black person reaching the apex. But I think what you're saying about providing opportunity is, first of all, let's just be clear. Like, not all black people want to be fucking athletes, people, or make music. Like, it's insane.
Or can be.
But it's just insane to like, oh, well, they have these ways out. It's like, well, that's where the bias is, right? Like, you, me, I get to choose from all the available options. And what we're saying to some groups is, well, we gave you these, almost like it's like an award. Like, well, come on, we gave you these other options. And what I'd actually love to talk about, because we were saying initially, I don't want these conversations to be, and we've had a couple of them, but I don't want them to be like, when did you meet with a cop and your black identity got pushed in your face? And it doesn't all have to be about those. And if you have stories like that, that's fine.
No, I don't. No.
But But I think we were talking before we started recording about the fact that, right, this line of thinking, like with that white guy who like yelled at you, is pervasive and sort of it like leaks in. It always finds its way. So when was one of the first times in your life you became aware of it? Like explicitly you went, oh. Do you remember something like that?
You know, I don't know if I have an exact memory of it, but when I was 7, I lived in a predominantly Black neighborhood, and you would have experiences maybe at the corner store where people would watch you, like if you were getting like a candy bar or something like that. I don't think I have like a specific memory, but it's as young, at least that young, where you would notice that people may follow you in the grocery store or in the corner store, and you're 7. I've also been, when I've been younger, like 10, 11, been yelled, like screamed at by adults. And, for whatever, maybe I was jaywalking or something like that. Like I was just outside being a kid and been followed home. A woman followed me in her car and just screamed at me the entire way home, yelling like profanities at me. I don't remember if they were racial in nature, but it's something like that. Where would you do that if I was just like a little white girl walking around the neighborhood? Right. You know, I wasn't doing anything. Yeah. I mean, even if I was, I don't know what kind of adult screams at an 11-year-old that they don't know. Yeah. And follows them home to the point where she was in front of my house when I ran in to get my parents, and then obviously sped away and drove off. So I've had a lot of interactions like that, or just walking by someone's, like if someone walked by your house and just stepped in your lawn and someone yelled at me about that, just things like that, that you have to believe it has to be because, I'm Black.
Yeah. It's so hard. It's so hard to just carry around like this mark, right? Like I had an accent moving in here. You can work on your accent. Like you can
and
fake.
You have to speak for people to hear it.
That's true. Yeah.
I think that's...
You don't walk into a room and someone's like, you're from the Middle East. Where's your turban?
Well, Yeah, well, some people, yes.
Some people
but you
do.
particularly.
True.
Yeah. We've had friends that said
True.
that to me because we were actually, that's so true. We were in Joshua Tree just last week and we were talking about that and they were saying, well, yeah, maybe you could pass.
Yeah.
But one of our friends was saying, I can't. I walk into a room and, again, by the way, I think we need to be really clear about this definition of white is also pretty freaking flexible, people. Mm-hmm. Like, Jews have somehow decided that we're part of the white community, but there were decades and centuries where Jews were not considered white. It's almost like they didn't get assimilated into that group. It was an other. And so I think the reason I want to make that point is it's easy to sit on the sidelines when you're the one being privileged, when you're the one that's getting the benefit.
Right.
But what's that? Trump actually just tweeted this recently. Those who don't learn from the past are doomed to repeat it. Thank you for that, Trump. And that that quote is well worn and true. And I think what upsets me, and I've shared about this before, is for a lot of my Jewish friends or family members and things of that nature that miss the line on this for me, is I feel like they missed the line because we're not in the crosshairs right now. Like, we're not the ones being persecuted. So we're like, oh, fuck, cool. We're out of the limelight. Just, you pay attention to those guys for a while, But I think it's our duty, especially as a group of people that's been through that pain before, to say, hey, we're seeing a group of people being targeted. We know where this leads. Like, and we might get caught up in it later or not. That's not even the point. The point is we know where that leads, and it's not good for any of us.
Right. And for the Jewish people, at some points, not at all points, but they had allies, and that helps because when you're suffering, you just can't do it alone. You're at the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have the power.
Right.
So I know one of the things you really wanted us to talk about is the criminal justice system and some biases inherent in that. What are like the data points? What are the pieces that when you look at them, you're like, holy shit, this is something we have to address systemically?
I mean, so the big thing for me is just why we are putting people in jail in the first place. And a lot of it has to do with drug crimes. They're nonviolent.
Yeah.
but all the studies have shown that both whites and blacks and Latinos, everybody would kind of use drugs at the same rate. But people of color actually are getting arrested like 80 times more than their white counterparts. They even have studies that show that white adolescents actually use drugs at a higher rate than their black counterparts, but they are, 75% or something really high, I don't know, less likely to go to jail because of it.
Sure.
Their white teens are 4 times more likely to be hospitalized for drug overdose, but they're not being targeted the same way. We basically give cops leeway to decide when and against whom they punish for drug use. Yeah. It's one of the only crimes that no one's really calling the cops, because if you're using drugs, you're not going to call the cops on yourself. You're not going to call the cops on your dealer. Your dealer's not going to call the cops on you. So the cops kind of just use their own discretion on how to catch people, who to catch, and who they choose.
Yeah.
If you have robberies, someone calls the cops. If there's a rape or a murder, someone is volunteering that, I'm a victim, I want this person taken away. But for drugs, we don't do that. So we just give them complete control, and they are basically filling the prisons with these people who are using drugs, which should be not criminalized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you haven't seen 13, that's a movie that really speaks to this, right? The concept of like incarceration is almost a new enslavement.
Oh, 100%. I'm like getting moved because I hate the prison system so much, just in general. But
You're allowed to be moved.
I had started reading this book called Mass Incarceration. It's the New Jim Crow, and it goes through history. And it talks about how we use the words tough on crime, how we took $17 billion from housing and invested $19 billion in prisons. So that basically became the new housing. If more black people are...
The privatization of prisons is insane. Like, if you just think about that for a second, the point of any company, a for-profit company, is to make more money. That is the bottom line goal. Right. And once you start making prisons private, they have a clear target of increasing population in prisons.
Well, and increasing crime, or the illusion that there is more crime. Really, you don't need to increase crime to arrest people. You just need to arrest more people, right? Yeah. So, and then my point to this all that I think gets me started on it is just, do I believe any government should treat people this way at all? And I just... that's the core of it. But when you drill down to it more, it's just impacting the black communities more than it is any other community. If things were all equal, then the prison population should be reflective of our population. And it's not. Unless,
and I have to say this, but unless you have the core belief that black people and people of color are just more violent and more prone to criminal behavior,
right?
And that's why they need to be controlled, and that's why you got to be tough on crime,
right?
And we've talked about that in a few of these episodes, because it's nice to skirt around the issue and sort of have these affirmative visions for where we're going. But I think we're missing the point that for a lot of people, there's a core belief that just, black people are not as fill in the blank.
Right. Well, and that's why it's the job of the government to step in, because we're not doing it on our own. We can't do it. It's time for them to send a message like, this is not okay. We do not tolerate this. We are reconstructing the police departments. We are deeming the KKK a terrorist group. It's up to them to send the message to guide the people, because there are groups of people being hurt by these people who have that idea, and that idea is not okay.
Yeah. So I think there are indoctrination ways of doing this, like through education and changing curricula and things like that, right? I think that's, if we start teaching people differently, we talked with Jean about that too, to look at black people and people of color differently,
then
and understand the longer history.
We'll have a different world.
I know, but that's what fucking sucks. Is I don't want to wait 20 years. Number one, I don't want to wait 20 years. Secondly, here's the thing: we're having conversation with our friends right now, so I think there are opportunities. I want to bring this back to the ally conversation you were having. I think we do have opportunities to go, hey, look, I have a feeling when I'm talking to you that part of what's coming up here is you really believe that like black people are more criminal than white people. And I mean, one of my friends, I consider her a good friend. She's educated, right? Has a master's in therapy, really educated person. And she sent me this study showing that there's no bias in police shootings based on race, with this like code word in it. This is the second time I've talked about it in one of these interviews, so I apologize for those of you who heard it the last time, but it really pissed me off. And statistically, what they controlled for was previous criminal activity. So they said, based on criminal activity, once you control for that and you remove that from the equation, there's no bias. And I said, yeah, but that's like a code word.
Right.
Controlling for criminal activity is controlling for all the other things that will have brought a criminal behavior or a criminal mark on somebody's record. And as you just pointed out, black people are more likely to be searched and therefore more likely to be stopped, more likely to then be searched, more likely to be arrested if they're searched, less likely to be able to post bail. And so they stay in jail longer. They're less likely to be able to hire, counsel for themselves. So it's like, especially when you look at marginalized groups, right? So it's not like all black people are the same, which is part of why this conversation is so fucking complicated for people to understand. Of course, there are black people that have a bunch of money and can pay for lawyers. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about average poverty rates. And so you get people who are more likely to get stopped, more likely to get searched, more likely to get arrested, less likely to post bail, more likely to get convicted, more likely to spend more time in jail. Sure, you control for that and there's no bias, but you just control for 14 different forms of criminal justice bias against a group of people. So stop controlling for it. That's the problem.
Right.
If there was a way, like you're talking about, to make cops stop white people equally as often as they stop black people, period, at least the stopping part.
Right.
We can start like playing that game. So I think that's where
I think it's more so just giving the cops the right to decide, okay, so if they stop you for a broken tail light, they can just ask you, can I search your car? But why? Why do we give them that power? Because they are more likely to do that, ask that question for black people than they are for white people. And that's kind of where the root of it is. And I think something like that went up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said that was okay. So that's an instance of the Supreme Court not protecting us, all of us, not just black people, but black people they're more affected by it because the cops get to make that decision. It's not like they search every single person that has a broken tail light.
I've been pulled over at least twice for a broken tail light.
There are
not even for a moment would they have asked me to search my car.
Right. And there are so many stories of people getting caught with just drugs that exact way, because people don't even know that they can say no to the cop. They don't know that that's not allowed.
Let's be honest. I mean, I've been arrested a bunch of times. Like, you can say no to the cop all you want. Cops get to do whatever the fuck they want.
Yes, exactly.
Period.
Even if they're not
they don't
educated
even need
enough
probable
to know.
cause. They can just make up probable cause.
Exactly. Well, yeah.
The dude
not to
looked
mention
suspicious.
that kind of stuff. Exactly.
It's insane. I've seen a cop. I mean, this broke. I always, when I engaged in criminal activity, I knew I had the probability of being arrested. So it wasn't like that was surprising to me. But I remember the first time I saw a cop, and forgive me because I'm a white dude, so seeing this was shocking to me, on the stand, just lying blatantly.
Yeah.
Just blatantly lying. And I'm like, oh shit. Like, that's, of course they're going to believe the cop over the criminal.
Yes.
Obviously. But the cop doesn't even have to say the fucking truth. And so if he doesn't have to say the truth, he gets to keep up with his story. The judge literally looked at me and said, well, I don't believe you. I believe the cop. And I'm like, well, obviously you're going to believe the cop, but he's lying to you. So cool. And that's it. And again, right, saying that, fully acknowledging that I had to, like, the number of times I got arrested was not at all related to the number of offenses I had. Like, I should have been arrested many, many more times than I got arrested, because I was actually fucking up. I was actually doing wrong things all the time. Still related to drugs, and we can have that whole decriminalization or legalization conversation. But
also, even the time you spent in jail would have been exponentially more for a black person.
Oh my God. Forget the fact that we had to come up with 35 or 40 grand. This is like 2000, like 40 grand for a lawyer.
Right.
Immediately they're out.
I mean, at least
they're just public defender.
And then
they plea them out.
Oh, public defender.
So it doesn't.
The worst
it doesn't matter if you did it or not. You're going to get pled out because you're afraid of what could happen if you go to trial. And then if you think the cop's going to lie about you, why even bother going?
You know the cop's going to lie about you because you've got 40 friends who've gone through this before, and they're like, they said I had drugs on me. I had no drugs on me. Okay, well, the cop found drugs on you. Or, I mean, even the broken taillight thing that you're saying. I mean, okay, I've only seen this in movies, and some of these movies are from like the stories are from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, etc. But there's nothing stopping a cop from just like breaking your taillight if he really needs to arrest you later and it wasn't broken before. Like, there's a bunch of
sketchy.
One of our friends was saying, well, a lot of cops are good, and that's great. It's great that a lot of cops are good.
A lot of black people are good, and some are not, and a lot of white people are good, and some are bad apples.
But like a black person who offends is to me equivalent to a white person who offends, right? Like, they're in the same category.
Right.
You take a bad cop who has explicit bias and is on a mission,
and
they can affect thousands of lives.
Paid by the people.
Yeah.
I think that's an important distinction to make, is that giving the cops free reign to do whatever they want is you're basically letting the government do whatever they want. And that's not how the government's supposed to work. Government serves the people. Mm-hmm. We elect them. We appoint them. They are ruled by the people. We have a democracy. They're called civil servants for a reason. The cops are supposed to protect and serve. We have a social contract with the government. It's basically a deal. We pay you these taxes. In exchange, you work in our best interest. Yeah. And all the protesting that's going on, all the rioting, is letting them know you're not working in our best interests anymore. And that's the important part.
Yeah. That's the key.
Yeah. But there's so many points in what you're bringing up that are, again, it's so nice to think that that's the way it is, but we're in a representative democracy,
I think,
which means that districts and election standards and protocols matter, because we know, I mean, it might not be Jim Crow time anymore, but we know that there are standards put in place, gerrymandering and things like that
and not to mention, they don't let people who are felons vote at all. No. So there goes the black population.
Or the idea, right? We've talked for a while about, or not we, but it's been spoken for a while, that only doing elections on one day in the middle of the day, this specifically disenfranchises people who have to work 2 or 3 jobs and don't have the luxury of being able to say, hey, tomorrow I'm gone to vote. And yes, you're supposed to be let go for voting.
Right.
But we all know that what you're supposed to have, what's supposed to happen in your employment, what happens is
different.
Is potentially different depending on what job you have and what control you have of that job. So, people, this is why the part of the resistance, at least for mail-in ballots and the extension of voting and all the voting requirements, like, it's just, I don't know.
It's deliberately very challenging for anyone to vote with an education.
Yeah, but particularly for the people who are disenfranchised.
Right, of course.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
I'm just saying, I think it's hard to vote. I think it's a pain in the butt. I think
they don't make it easy.
No.
And it's already confusing when you're voting. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
You're like, what's going on? And further, though, if you don't feel like your vote matters, or you don't feel like the government's taking care of you, why bother? So if you already have these hurdles, you can't get to a polling place, you have a job, you may not have a driver's license or whatever the reason may be, why would you try to overcome all of those hurdles and then get to the poll and vote and then elect somebody and still feel like your needs aren't being... Exactly.
They're not protecting
they're going to screw me either way.
Point?
Who cares?
Right. It doesn't matter who's in office. Yeah. It really doesn't matter, I think, to the black population. I mean, I guess I don't want to speak for everybody, but I mean, they historically don't vote.
Yeah. So we just watched Selma, a movie I wanted to watch forever. Have you ever seen it?
I haven't seen it.
And it really centers on, obviously, on Selma and the walk across the bridge, but this idea that when voting rights were instated for previously enslaved black citizens, the next hurdle was getting registered.
Right.
Like, cool, now you technically can vote, but no white official, and they were all white officials, especially in the South, would let you even register. And they would create these massive barriers and hurdles for you to jump through. So no black people were able to register, which said, well, we gave you the right to vote, but you're not allowing us to actually vote. And so then you pass that, and then you make ID requirements, and then you make it really, really difficult to get to balloting. And then you make, like, it's almost as if we're like trying to play the game. Sophie and I talk about this sometimes in the context of a relationship. It's almost like you're trying to play the game of, like, how far can I move the goalpost on you? So it's like, oh, here, the ball's over here, just kick it 5 inches, but hold on, I'm going to move the goal like 3 more feet. And then we just keep moving it farther and farther. And
And then when they do vote, I don't know, it was an election a couple of years ago in Georgia, and then the Republicans were saying that we had bust in voters, bust in a bunch of black voters because they're like, no, this can't be right.
The results can't be right.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I don't know how.
So what is it? Let's just get into the emotional part of this, like, because this is all heady and it's great, and I want policy to change, and I hope it will. But what does it feel like to sort of, you're talking about what it was like as a little girl, and these things would pop up every once in a while, and you're biracial. So yeah. I don't know if that means that even within each one of the two separate communities that you're part of, you feel bias.
So I don't know. So I'm lucky. I look ambiguous to a lot of people. So I think sometimes even in the black community, I am privileged within there. Not everyone can tell that I'm black when they first meet me. Some people may think I'm like Indian or Latina. So I get the benefit of the doubt sometimes.
Just because of the confusion, you're saying?
Yeah. Okay. Because I have,
so interesting.
I have not as kinky hair. So like when I was growing up, they would say I have good hair, which in and of itself is really horrible. God, horrible. Like, it's just horrible that you would phrase it that way, but that's the good. That's kind of what they would say. And my features aren't stereotypically black. They're, so I think in that way I'm already privileged. So that's, I think, part of the reason why I was really hesitant to even speak to you guys, because I didn't want to really I didn't want my story to overshadow it, but like what's going on now, because I'm already just less likely to be as heavily impacted, especially with the cop stuff or whatever. And I also went to USC, so in that way, I'm also privileged. I live in Brentwood, so it's, it's not like I'm struggling in that way. Yeah. But like you said, I do have...
And we're in California in general, so let's just acknowledge...
Yes, exactly.
Let's just acknowledge for a second that, yes, we've had people on here who talked about being profiled, et cetera, by police, but we're in LA. Like, it's relatively good here. There are other places.
Well, I think it's tough because like South Central LA, I think would be arguably different. Yeah. But when I'm in South Central, I feel fine because every black person knows I'm black, but white people don't necessarily know that I'm black.
That's so crazy.
Yeah. So in that way, I am lucky in all the ways because I feel comfortable in black neighborhoods and I feel comfortable in white neighborhoods. I only feel uncomfortable, and it's only ever been an issue when someone knows I'm black. And that's kind of the scary part.
What does that mean? Like, just explain that.
So I think one of the things that's happened to me in the past that probably has stayed with me the longest is when I was in college, I dated a guy who wasn't white or black, but I had met his parents when we were just friends, and his mom was super nice to me and super like just normal, I guess. And a couple months later, him and I became boyfriend and girlfriend, and she visited USC and she was extremely cold to me. And it was like for over a weekend, like 3 days or whatever. And he didn't really notice because, what is he?
Because he's a guy.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't pay attention to
shit like 19, so he doesn't even care.
Doesn't help.
But after she left, I said something like, hey, like, your mom was being really strange to me. Like, I don't think she likes me. And he was like, what? That can't be true. Like, I don't see what you're talking about. But he emailed her or called her or something and asked her. And, she kind of gave him this, she kind of made up some reasons, like she wouldn't help me with the dishes, which was just like not true. But at the end, when he was like prodding her more and more, she finally was like, well, doesn't she just want to date somebody who's more like her? And
there you go.
Here's the part that I think infuriated me back then is, he went to a nice private school and I went to public school. And I'm the first person in my family to go to college. And we were both at USC at the same time. And we had the same major and the same minor. So we were in the exact same spot in life.
Yeah.
And, the only difference between us was I am black and he is not. And it was to the point where we broke up, not because of that, for whatever reason. And we were both studying abroad at the time that we broke up. And he kept telling his parents that we were dating because he felt like he didn't want them to be satisfied that we had broken up.
So that's the part, like when we were starting out talking about, those are those impacts that you've been through. That I mean, when I say we can talk about it as small if we want to, but that's a pretty messed up, like, extra consideration when you're gonna go date somebody is, oh fuck, I'm gonna meet their parents, and then do I have to worry about whether, like, now at least I met somebody who's normal and nice and like can relate to me as a person instead of what I look like, or all the different pieces that come.
Right.
But now there's this next layer of like,
well, so I have a boyfriend now, and when we first started dating, I was like, have you told your family that I'm Black? And he was like, what?
Is he white?
Yeah, he's white. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and he's from the Midwest. And so it just made me from Ohio. So I'm just like, I don't think I can go through that again at this age. Like, it's very tough, especially when you're older and you're thinking of being a family. And my kids will be Black. So there's like no way around that.
I just hate that we even had to say that sentence though, right? Like, there's no way around that.
Yeah.
That's fucked up by itself. Like that is fucked up enough for me to keep having this conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I think to white people, sometimes it can be like, why do I need to tell my parents? And like, you don't know what your parents may or may not say.
Exactly.
You're not them. You don't know how the rest of your family may react. Like, as much as people want to believe that their friends or their families are, they can be good people or whatever, but until you're confronted with something like this, how can you really say that you're not racist? And that's kind of a problem I have too, when people don't have, like, I'm from Portland. Portland has so many white people. They don't have any Black people.
Portlandia.
Yeah. And they are always like, well, we're not racist. I'm like, but how do you know?
You
Because
got
if
no
there's
Black
no Black people.
Right. That's exactly when I reached out to my friends from my hometown, a really small town in Maryland. We had one Black person. I was the only Jew, and I'm not even technically Jewish because it's not my mom, it's my dad that's Jewish. I now converted, but like, I was the weird one, and there was one Black person. And so I posed that exact question, like, just kind of in a different way. And I offended the entire town. Is offended because they're like, who you calling racist?
You're
like,
snobby, like, California West Coast bitch now who's too uppity for us.
Well,
and she's like, but just look at it for a minute.
Look at the town.
Yeah. I mean, and people get really up in arms about being called racist. And I'm like, well, if you're not racist, I feel like it shouldn't be that big of a deal. I mean, like,
why are you getting upset?
Yeah. I mean,
that's so
and
funny.
I wasn't talking just about you. I was talking about all of us.
Yeah.
We're in this together.
It's like calling somebody like gay and they like get all defensive. You're like,
exactly.
Dude, why are you being so defensive about it? If it's not a deal, then don't worry about it.
I'm actually not, or I am. I also just need to just declare the elephant in the room, which is that Black babies are the cutest babies on earth. And so he should be so lucky. And
well, I mean, his parents are great, and I've never had a conversation with them about race. They are definitely more conservative. I think that him, and that's something that I'm still going through with him now, just like navigating that, because you date somebody and you don't start off, I don't start off with, I don't want to say everybody, I don't start off with being like, what do you think about racism in the United States or whatever? Sure. It comes up in conversation, or when someone says something that's inappropriate and that hurts my feelings or whatever, and then you start having these conversations, and by that point you're already dating, and so you're like, okay, well, now I have to have these really tough conversations with this person that I love and who loves me. Yeah. And he just had such a different upbringing than I did, and he didn't know any Black people really. I mean, he knows them, but so when you don't have that, how can you really understand that some of the things that you may say or think or do can be hurtful to other people?
Where did you grow up?
Portland.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
You grew up there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We were watching this movie. One of Sophie's really close friends, our friends, is a ballet dancer, and so she was showing us a movie called The Black Ballerina about discrimination within the dance industry. And they were showing this one dancer who did get accepted and was sort of having made like primary roles as a ballerina. And the reason that statement you made, which is there's no way to get around it, really hit me, is we were talking, and so we would stop the movie periodically and explain to our kids kind of what's happening, because it's hard for kids doesn't fucking know.
Right.
They're like 8 years old. They have no idea what discrimination is. It's weird to them that you pick based on race.
Which also, I just want to say, a lot of parents, I keep seeing this going around, which is kind of coming back to like the all lives matter debate or defense. Most parents that I keep seeing, white parents, keep saying, my kids don't see color. My kids don't see color. The point here is to educate them on what exists in the world, depending on their age.
Well, and also, I do want to point out,
Yeah.
Black kids do know what discrimination is at the age of 8. And I think that's something that is kind of, it's lucky if your kid doesn't, because that means they haven't experienced it. But I think it's important to explain, like, the I don't see color or they don't see color thing is hurtful.
Yeah.
Because then you can't account for the implicit bias that we were talking about earlier. The only way you can fix that stuff is when you see color.
Yes. Exactly.
So Kai said in the thing, you said, oh, well, she can get away, because there was a dancer that was light-skinned, that was the one that was getting the role. She can get away with being white. And it was the same sort of thing as what you just said of there's no way to get around it.
Yeah.
It's almost like this underlying concept that, well, if you could get away with it, then you should.
There are people who, because there are people, and there are many stories of families who are just now finding out that their great-grandmother was actually Black, but she was passable white, and she just lived her entire life as being white because it's easier. And there are stories where the woman married a man who was racist, who hated Black people, and that's why she never, ever, ever told anybody, because she had been passing for white, because it was a better life. So there are kind of ways around it, and back in the day, if you could take them, you would.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's heartbreaking to hear those stories, because you look back and you feel sad that that's what that they felt that they had to resort to that. But you also feel like, well, you just got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
What you want to sign up for sitting in the back of the bus, or, maybe getting lynched, or being a second-class citizen your entire life, or you could pretend to be white and have a normal life.
Yeah.
Even though, like, the person you're sleeping with every night is racist. And
like, would hate you if they really know who you are.
Yeah.
So I think that's, to me, this is where the rubber meets the road, and this is why we're doing the work, and why we hope to keep doing the work is, I think the vast majority of people, at least who listen to this podcast, understand that the end goal is to get to a place where those things don't matter.
Right.
The end goal is to get to the place where those things, and to recognize that in trying to get there might be things we have to do along the way that feel weird and awkward and uncomfortable and questionable. Like, why do we have to see color if what we're trying to do is get to the place where we don't see color? Right. Well, because maybe what we have to do is identify and dismantle the systemic bias and injustice that exists. And the only way to do that is to actually take a look at what's going on inside, right? Like, we all want to be disease-free, but that might mean we have to look at viruses and bacteria and understand how they work in the body. We can't just ignore them and just, like law of attraction, hope that we never get sick.
Well, and like, if I saw this, someone on Instagram posted this, they had signs at a protest, and it said, like, if you don't see color, then you don't see patterns. So you don't notice that the only people the cops are stopping are Black. You don't, like, if you're in a class and the teacher's always picking on only the Black kids, like, let's say you're 8, if you didn't see color, then you wouldn't be able to tell an adult, like, this teacher is only calling on the Black kids. Like, how can you affect change without noticing the color?
That's really
and if someone could explain that to me, then maybe we can get behind the I don't see color thing. But
it takes layers. It takes levels and layers, and we haven't gotten to the first level yet.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably just that there's hundreds of layers and we've gone through the first 15 or something, but there's a shit ton left, because
I like this. I have a racism scale, and where do you fall? And obviously it's way more intense than this, but even this is examples of terrorism, overt racism, subconscious racism, and then there's indifference, defensive, justification, denial.
Right.
white savior, woke justification, performative ally, awareness, allyship, abolish.
I didn't even know the performative ally was a thing until yesterday.
Yeah.
And
I didn't know it was a thing until like
Black
last
squares.
week. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
well, no, one of our friends, close friends again, was telling me that there's a person that she knows who's presenting one way on their stories, and then to their close friend stories, pushing like like conspiracy theory, propaganda, and things like that about maybe this is staged, maybe it's driven by like Antifa and all this stuff. And I'm going, wait, but you're not questioning the Black Lives Matter narrative publicly. You're just questioning it behind the scenes. That's even more fucked up.
Right.
You're like one of the people we need to watch out for, because you're the motherfucker that'll shake our hand and be like, oh, it's all good, let's go to the protest. And then on the back end, like literally, and he said this apparently, go vote for Trump.
Yeah.
But privately.
That's
Yeah.
insane.
Behind closed doors.
I mean, that's the only thing I worry about with right now, where everyone's really afraid to speak their mind, is that then these people live under their white hoods. And that's kind of, I think, why the KKK is a thing and why they wear the hoods, because they get to be anonymous and like do whatever they want under
Sure.
that disguise or whatever.
That's what I learned about the Trump election. I said this to Sophie. Sophie was devastated for like 3 weeks when Trump got elected. And I said,
I wasn't surprised at all.
that's what all people who are subject to racism. Did you see the SNL the day after Trump got elected?
Was it Aziz Ansari?
No, it was
I was in Herndon, Virginia, which is like outside of DC when it happened, and I was devastated. But I wasn't like, surprised.
it was Dave Chappelle was hosting and Chris Rock was on, and the first skit, the opening skit, the cold open was white people watching the elections, and Dave Chappelle is at the house, and he's hanging out with them, and they're like, "Oh, this is gonna be so amazing! Clinton's gonna win," and then they fall apart gradually, and when it ends, they're like, "America is racist," and Chris Rock walks in, he's like, "The fuck have we been telling you for like 25 years? Where have you been?"
Yeah,
and that was the thing that I that hit me right away is, oh damn, there's a part of the population that's been too scared to speak. And now we've given them a voice. And my fear is that and I think you're right on with this, my fear is that we make it unsafe again to talk, and it'll just be the underbelly again for the next however long until it comes out. What we have to do instead, and this is where I come on the like grassroots up versus systematic down way of looking at things. And I don't think it's an either or, I think it's both.
Yeah, you meet in the middle, I think.
I think, like what I told our friend who saw this guy representing two different opinions on social media, close friends versus everybody, was it's your job to say to him that's not okay. It's your job to say, hey, I just want you to know that supporting a cause while questioning it behind the scenes is not, at least be honest.
Yeah.
At least tell us how you really feel, because now I don't really know how to relate to you. I'm not okay with you suggesting that this is all some like weird conspiracy. My thing about all these conspiracy theories is I don't care who's funding what.
Right.
It would be difficult to argue that there is not racial bias built into our systems right now. And so whether the match that lit this fire was supported or not by money from A, B, or C sources is almost irrelevant to the conversation.
Right, I agree. I mean, a lot of the conversations I have with my boyfriend about this stuff have to do with speaking out when I'm not there. Because I stand up for myself. I will, point something out if I think something's wrong. I always voice my opinion, but when I'm not there, what do you do? Because people talk a lot more freely when there's not a Black person in the room.
Oh, of course.
And it's basically his job to speak up on my behalf. You can't let these people just say whatever they want, because when you don't say anything, you're co-signing everything they say.
Exactly.
So that makes me think that you think it's okay when people use like racial slurs or, maybe not slurs even, but just when you make passing comments about Black people or people of color, if you're not standing up, then you're letting them walk all over me, even though I'm not even there. And that's why I think that letting Black people speak and letting people hear from them is important. All the friends I've heard from in this past couple of weeks none of them have said any of those things like, I'm here for you or whatever. They've all said things like, I'm really thankful to have you as a friend because you've taught me so much over the years that I've known you. And I'm able to have all these conversations with my friends and my family members. And that's just because I've always had an open dialogue about race and politics, not because I'm teaching my friends, because I'm not. I'm just being open about my experiences as any friend should, right? And I mean, that's important because these people have access to people that I don't have access to.
Right.
These aren't my aunts and uncles. My aunts and uncles are Black. So, I mean, like,
Right.
they're, you know.
And this is exactly why we're having these conversations. Right. When you did, you know, thank goodness you came and didn't follow that voice of, I'm not enough, I'm not Black enough, I'm not this,
right.
I'm not that. We need to have these conversations that are uncomfortable and make us think something. But even if it doesn't make you uncomfortable, to have these conversations, to take this now and promise that you're going to go take this into your world. And maybe you don't have a single aunt or uncle, doubtful, or grandparent that is potentially racist, you know, even in the subtext. But go out there, and when you hear someone say something that doesn't feel right, you stand up for it.
Right.
So that we can change our future for at least our children.
Right.
It may not be fast, but it could be fast if we all step up in different ways. And that's part of it, is stepping up and having these conversations is a huge part of it.
Right. Well, and even racist sometimes is a really strong word,
right.
But I have conversations with lots of people who will say something in passing and I'll be like, hey, that was kind of messed up. Like, you shouldn't say that.
Yeah.
And so it's even stuff like that, because those small, I guess, trip ups feed into our bias that we have. They kind of highlight it. Like, if...
Can you give an example? So I heard I caught the tail end of a conversation the other day, and this beautiful Black woman was sharing about braids and how, I don't know, one of the Kardashians made these braids be called now boxer braids. Or she renamed them. I don't remember what she calls them.
She called them. It was. I think the story is Kim Kardashian called them Bo Derek braids.
Okay.
Bo Derek's a white woman who I don't know who that is.
She did a movie. She did a film.
I don't know who
this
person is.
She was like this beautiful actress, and she did braids for like a certain movie. And so that's what all white people know braids from. Is that
exactly? But braids are a protective hairstyle for Black women, and hair is like a really, really sensitive subject because it's a big part of your identity in the Black community. So, something like that, that's really tough because that can be seen as cultural appropriation.
Right.
And a big part of that, I think, has to do with the fact that Black women may not be able to wear braids to work. They may feel like they can't wear braids to like a professional interview. Even like when my hair, I don't have braids, but like I will be really... I didn't want to wear my hair curly for a long time because I felt like it looked too wild, even though this is just what my hair looks like.
Right.
It's just like what it looks like. So I straightened it for a long time when I was growing up. And just this past year, am I wearing it curly again? Because right now curly hair is in. So it makes it easier for people to go natural, which is really great. But that cultural appropriation comes in because Black people are used to white people, I guess, coming in and taking the parts that they like out of the culture and then profiting off of it.
Right.
So fashion, music, hair, stuff like that. And then when people kind of get mad that people are upset about that, I mean, Kim Kardashian has this huge following and brand, and
that's an opportunity.
Yeah.
Well, not just that. Remember when she messed up by naming her like underwear thing kimono?
Yeah.
And the Japanese community
that's appropriation
blew up,
too. Exactly.
100%.
Yes.
But she retracted.
Yes.
Because the outcry was so big, and nobody, and I think maybe this is an important thing to kind of just say, like, I didn't hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, those Japanese getting really upset about people stealing the name of like
their
classic sacred clothing."
Yeah.
Nobody complained about that shit for 5 seconds. It was like a wave. They changed the name of the product. It was done.
Right.
And I think what we're talking about here is this. I mean, we talked about this in another episode, but whether it's Elvis Presley and rock and roll, like, you know, you can go back, or Marshall Mathers and Eminem and rap. Like, you look at all these examples of what you're talking about. Now, I hope we get to a place where there is,
there's a difference between appropriation and appreciation, right? There is a way to do these things because you appreciate the culture, right?
Celebrating the culture from which it comes.
Right. Right.
Or even integrating it. But I think what you're talking about is literally lifting things to profit off of them, because you go, oh, I think I can make money off that.
That's like kind of where it gets, and I have a tough time with appropriation too, because I think it's one of those things where like, I just know it when I see it. Like I can tell when something's wrong. I have a harder time really defining it, because where do we draw the line? Like, where do we draw the line? So much of hip hop is ingrained in just everyday fashion.
Nowadays, yes.
Exactly.
Certainly.
Now it is, right? But were those first people considered cultural appropriation? I don't know. I'm that must have been in the 80s, I guess. But
yeah, I mean, probably even earlier, like 70s when it first started, like literally DJs in neighborhoods, literally spinning records and trying to match them and all that kind of stuff. So that was.
But I like that appropriation versus appreciation. Yeah.
I wonder if even that conversation has to do, and I'd love if you have some examples of things people say and they don't realize that it's inappropriate. I would actually love some of that like things you've heard, because that would be, I think, like almost like real tips for people to go, oh, that topic, this topic, etc. But what I realized in one of our previous conversations, it might have been Sean that we talked about this with, was it's almost like appropriation is the worst when it's done by an organization. Like people can be inspired and borrow and all that stuff, but I realized that, you're talking about the 70s and 80s of where like hip hop or this kind of like rhythmic style was created in America more than anywhere else. Sampling wasn't a problem, because people who were doing it were actually using other people's music. Right. That's how it started. And it wasn't really until the last like 10, 15 years or so where you can't sample anybody else. You can't use it. And it's not because the musical style changed. I think the people who make the music would love to continue doing it the way they always have, which is borrowing from things. But money came into the equation. I was going to say,
money.
And money, not exclusively, right? I mean, you've got Diddy, you got Jay-Z, you got people who like own their own record labels and huge distribution channels and all that stuff. But the people who own the music labels are, for the most part, still white.
Oh, yeah. And I had this thought actually when we were talking earlier about getting big, and it's just athletics and music. But when you look at everyone who owns all the sports teams, who owns all the record labels, who's actually making the real money, real money.
The billions.
Yes. Those are all white people.
I mean, Michael Jordan might be the exception to that rule, but there's like a handful of them. But
right. Dr. Dre, right?
Yeah.
But, I mean...
Yeah, you can count on like both hands.
Yeah.
The black people in the black community that are benefiting from it, and you would have a hard time counting on all your family's digits the white people who are right. benefiting. And I think that is where the rubber meets the road. And it is actually really inspiring. Now, I don't know how you feel about this, but cancel culture, whatever you want to call it, but some of the owners, some of the billionaires have been called to task over the last 5-10 years. Like, hey, you can't, because there's the Mark Cubans and those guys who are actually really inclusive and very collaborative, and their voices are starting to be heard. And is it also, I feel like it's a generational thing as well.
Yeah, it probably is a generational thing. I don't know. I don't know if I have a big opinion on the cancel culture. Is hard for me because I think, like we mentioned on earlier, is that it doesn't allow people room for growth sometimes. Yeah. So like sometimes I'll see stuff and I'm like, ooh, that was really swift. Like, we just gave up on this person. We didn't I mean, not every person, right? Some people rightfully so deserve to be outed and we should whatever. But sometimes when people are digging up tweets from like 10 years ago, I'm like, all right,
we're allowed to evolve.
What has been going on with this person in the past 10 years? Do we have any of their actions that might speak differently? Like, can we allow them to speak on this before we outright cancel them? So, I mean, I think that's just like a personal thing for me personally. Like, I would hate for any one of my decisions to have that big of an impact. I mean, and I feel this way about everything, like, especially about when we talk about prison, is someone makes one bad decision and that is the rest of their life.
Mm. Yeah.
And I kind of feel that way about sometimes when people are getting canceled so swiftly. I'm happy that some of the corporations right now have been, like, NASCAR banned Confederate flags, which I thought was really crazy.
I lost my mind when I got that email.
They would have to be banned?
They're banning Confederate flags at their races, which I'm like, I just can't believe they did it.
Oh, you can't believe they did it. I can't believe that it was still okay.
No, I believe it's still okay. I just can't believe they did it because it's
so
Much-
ingrained.
Well, it seems like that from the outside. I've never been to a NASCAR race, admittedly, because I would be
unsafe.
afraid. Yes, I would be afraid.
Yeah, it's there's this weird thing for me, First Amendment and all that. I don't know.
I just want to say
I
really
don't
quick.
know how we navigate that. I literally don't even have an answer.
I just can't. It's so interesting, the difference in our opinion. I got that email yesterday from the New York Times that NASCAR
Ban the Confederate
banned
flag.
the Confederate flags. And I was in awe and in shock that it's 2020 and that would even be a conversation. And your response, your reaction was like, oh, I'm surprised they even did that.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
just noticing. Like it's a...
But I think I don't know if that's a white black thing. I was surprised they did it because
it's so
a big
ingrained.
part of their constituency is Southern.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
and NASCAR
primarily
doesn't have
white.
to protect your First Amendment right to free speech. The government does, right? But private organizations can do whatever they want.
They can, but not. I mean, yeah, because it's not a protected class. Like which flag you have doesn't have a protected class. But what I'm saying is, I think what I was reading, there's one major black driver out of all the drivers in NASCAR. There's one. And so that's a big action on their part for what seems like right now a relatively small
Amazing.
portion of their constituency.
Right.
Look, I'm a cynical guy. I think they recognize that this is their way of entering a market that they haven't been able to penetrate before.
Yeah.
But still, smart fucking
Great.
decision. Good
Yes.
decision.
Because
Play
people
with your
will
money.
lead with their dollars anyways.
Yeah.
Play with your
I went
money.
to Ben and Jerry's and bought 3 pints of ice cream the other day.
Yeah.
And I don't even eat dairy.
And
Just because of Ben and Jerry's. Yeah.
I just found out that
Did you hand it out? What'd you do with it?
No, I ate it anyways
Yeah.
because,
in support.
because it's delicious.
Yeah.
And Ben and Jerry's is doing good work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just found out that Sprouts and Whole Foods both, I was just digging and doing some research. They both haven't made any public statements. And as I keep digging further, I will share publicly what I've learned, but it's not looking good in general. So there's that. But I asked our nanny, does a lot of our grocery shopping and food preps for us. And I asked her to shop. There's a local black market here, like 10 minutes away that I didn't even know about.
Right.
Like, A, I feel like a fucking jackass. B, oh, well, moving on. This is the new reality,
Right.
you know? And it's like, that's what is so important
People
right
will
now.
listen.
And
People will
resiliency.
listen.
Like, it's okay to like bounce back. Like we made a lot of mistakes and we will continue to create a pivot. Okay, now this is where we're going to put our money and our dollars.
I've been having a lot of conversations with people, both black people who feel like people are just jumping on the bandwagon now, and also white people who feel guilty that they feel like they're jumping on the bandwagon now.
Right.
And I heard this quote that has been resonating with me about this and just other things, but it was the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time is today.
Yeah.
I love it.
So,
And also, it's all good. Jump on the bandwagon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get
Just
over
also,
yourself.
also then keep
Also get over yourself.
and then keep talking to the people on the bandwagon
Yeah.
with you and become
Yeah.
friends with them.
Yeah.
And everything will be fine.
and like pass your shovel on. Like
I think that's true. It's too many people are waiting till they know everything to make exactly the right statement, which is my problem with the kind of cancel culture thing. Is like people are going to make mistakes. If you really want them to make statements, some people are going to fuck up that statement.
Yeah.
Let them fuck it up as long as they're on. Like even if they're holding on to one hand on the bandwagon, like running along with it, just like let them.
I agree. And that's why
along.
I was saying like my personal beliefs with cancel is just it doesn't allow people for growth.
Yeah.
People
I
grow,
love
people
that.
change. And the only way people change and grow is through conflict. So
it's true. I'm learning so much. I feel like I'm getting my PhD right now, and it's great, but it's also exhausting. It's like my brain hurts because I'm learning so much at a rapid speed. But I'm learning because I'm jumping in and taking risks.
Yeah.
Right? That's how. If you're going to learn a sport, you're going to learn how to ride your bike. The way he taught our kids to ride their bike was to fall.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be outside because I didn't want to watch it. But he's like, I'm going to go take them out and teach them how to fall gracefully.
Right.
And get back up. That's the point. That's how we grow.
Right.
Yeah.
Love it.
We ask our guests 5 questions.
Okay.
The first one is, what is the best advice you've ever received?
Ugh.
I love the plant a tree thing. I'm like obsessed with that.
Yeah, I just used that quote in one of our presentations. I love it.
I don't know where I heard it. Someone's like, where'd you hear that? I'm like, I have no idea. I think I was just like on Reddit. Best advice. I don't know. I don't know. I think that a a lot of the advice I give, I just give to myself, which I don't know what that means. But I think it would literally be just speak up.
Speak up.
Yeah.
Just speak up.
Just speak up.
I promise to not cancel you. How about that? We'll start there.
Was it Eleanor Roosevelt that said, speak up even if your voice shakes? Was that her?
I don't know, but we're about to check
I'm gonna
it.
find out.
We'll check.
We're going to check it.
That was always my thing.
The second question is, what has been your proudest moment to date? Doesn't have to have anything to do with the conversation we had today, but just in general in life.
I think the proudest moment I've had was when I got into USC. I don't think I really envisioned myself going to college, even though I was smart. I am smart, even though I've been smart my whole life.
No, when did that end? When did you stop being smart?
Well, I definitely was before, and jury's out about now. But when I got into USC, they send you this like beautiful packet that says like, welcome to the Trojan family. And you really feel like you've accomplished something. And I was one of the first people in my high school to get into USC out of everyone who applied. So I felt really great about that.
And first one in your family to go to college.
Yeah.
That's
I mean, to the point
huge.
where when I got in, when after my parents had dropped me off at school, my mom called me like 3 months later and was like, hey, I told someone at work you went to USC and they said that was a good school. And I was like, yeah, mom.
You're like, yeah, mom, one of the better.
great
Definitely one of the better ones.
That's so sweet.
Yeah.
What has been one of your most difficult or challenging moments?
I think the most difficult moment I've had is when my dad died. We were estranged. He was in and out of jail when I was a kid, and he died a drug addict. And by the time that he had died in 2014, I was 24 and I hadn't seen him in years. And so since he hadn't gotten married or had other kids, I was the next of kin. So when I flew home, I had to basically like sign all the documents, like releasing his body for cremation, blah, blah, blah. And I mean, that was like the last time I saw him was like at his wake. And so that was really powerful for me because I always thought that I just had a lot more time to work through this pain that I'd been carrying around throughout my childhood. And at that moment, I had realized that I was going to have to do it on my own. And I grew up pretty much like hating him.
Yeah.
And part of that was like, I thought he was a bad dad, but in reality, when you're an adult, at some point you don't need a dad and you could have still made the decision to forgive him as a human. And I just wish I would have been able to do that. So that was probably the hardest thing.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
We talk to a lot of people who do pretty amazing stuff in life, and to do that and be able to show up for it, we have to take care of ourselves. What are some of the things you do in your life for self-care to show up the best that you can every day?
I like to read books a lot. It's what I did when I was growing up. I mean, like I mentioned, I had kind of a tumultuous childhood, and my favorite thing to do was read books because it was just like an escape out into another person's life that wasn't my own. I also credit reading with being empathetic because you are continuously living someone else's life in other people's shoes, and I think that's benefited me a lot. So reading's definitely one of them. I would also say I just like to lay around. I mean, that's like probably my second favorite thing to do.
So you read and relax.
Yeah.
I love
Horizontal.
Yeah.
We're always like, we need to be horizontal right now.
Yeah. I mean, I think people love meditating. I think I just do it when I'm just laying and I think about nothing. So I do that naturally. I don't know. I like it.
Love it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Last question. Our podcast is called Ignited. What ignites you?
I have like a really big drive to learn and understand other people. And I like to chat. Like, it's like my favorite thing to do. I'll call Grace, who's like one of my best friends, and we'll just chat for like 3 hours, even though we see each other like every weekend. And we've been friends for 10 years. We've talked about everything there is to talk about, but I just love understanding other people's points of views. I love picking people's brains. That's what makes me feel excited.
That's awesome.
Us too.
Yeah, that's why we do this. Thank you so much for coming over and having this conversation. I still might draw on you after this for like stories and more like phrases and things that are kind of blind spots for people to pay attention to. But it's always really enlightening. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to the Ignited podcast. We were so happy to have you along for this ride. Please go and subscribe to this. Leave us a review. We love hearing from you. And if you want more, don't forget to go to ignited.com, where all the podcast episodes are available with show notes and so many of the little details and links from each one of these interviews. And you can look at all the future events that we have going on, all the things that make Ignited so special, even beyond this recording. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next week.